language learning is an emotional thing and it's a vulnerable thing. And I think music speaks to both of those points. Once you embody it, once you're producing it in song, I think it really improves pronunciation, confidence, memory. I've heard a few times people say, oh, I'm not good enough at the language yet to dive into the music. It's like, how good enough do you have to be to listen to a song?
This is the Language Podcast, and I'm Richard Simcott. On the show today, we have Desta Haile, musician and language teacher. In this series, we're giving you the tools you need to start learning a language. Today, we're discussing the art of listening. But this is no ordinary method we're sharing. We're talking about how music can supercharge your language learning abilities. By listening to songs in many different languages, I gained a wealth of experience during my university years. And it was so much fun too. That's why I had to invite Desta Haile onto the show. For many years, Desta has run the Languages Through Music program, helping her students to learn in the unique and fun way that led her to become a polyglot. First of all, Desta, welcome. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
I mean, when people talk about listening and you think about, okay, understanding what people are saying, in the very beginning stages, I guess the simple questions are straightforward, but things get complicated quite quickly. How do you see this connection between language learning and music?
For me, music is everything, because after kind of feeling my whole school life that I was terrible at language learning, music really showed me a way that it could work for me and could be enjoyable for me and could be a fuller picture, because, you know, so many listening tests at school are just so boring. Like, where are you from? I am from. Where is she from? And then you go around the room and you say what you heard. And I have a very short attention span. So those kinds of exercise really just did not hold my attention. But with music, not only was it kind of, you know, short, 2-3 minutes a song, but also really interesting, learning about artists, learning about different countries, learning about different styles of music. And music, because it's, you know, the great communicator, always uses the most useful vocabulary. Yeah, so many reasons that I feel that music is the best way, or one of the best ways to learn a language, whether or not you're a musician.
Well, you touched on quite a few interesting points there, actually. I think the first one probably that people are thinking about is this: why do you think it's so important and to learn languages through music? Why is it such an effective way of doing it?
I think, one, because it's accessible. So, you know, a lot of languages don't have all the apps and textbooks and websites and, you know, a lot of, you know, there's really 1,001 resources for Spanish and French and Mandarin, but there's, you know, 6,000-7,000 languages out there that might not have all of those materials, but every language has music. So I like that already. Music has like a social context, at least if it's, you know, curated a bit carefully. But music is born out of emotions, but also maybe what's happening in a country. Like, there's whole genres of music. So, for example, protest music, you know, if you were listening to protest songs, that would lead you into the history of a country, relationships with different countries. Music gives you historical and social context in a way that I didn't get at school. For example, with French class, even when I was learning in Ivory Coast, where I lived for several years, the focus was always France, even though there's almost 30 countries that speak it, that speak French. So I feel that music gives you a kind of wider picture. Also, I feel a lot of people may have had negative experiences learning languages at school, like I did. And so they're already put off language learning. They feel they're not good at it. But music is enjoyable. And, you know, people have their guard down when they're listening to music. If you put a language textbook in front of people, a lot of people will go, oh gosh, I don't know about that. But if you give people a playlist, like, oh wow, I might not understand everything, but I really like this or I really like that. So music appeals to all kinds of listeners, you know. I feel whether you're neurodivergent or you have dyslexia or something that puts you off just all those textbooks, or if you're a movement person, you need to be learning kinetically. Like there's so many ways that music extends a helping hand for language learning, I feel.
Yeah, I've got to say, I love the idea that you said about getting into the culture, the history, the people, these different movements, even politics, or what kind of makes people tick, I guess.
Yeah. We're all singing about the same stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? Is that there's so much that goes into the whole production of music and then the different genres as well.
Yeah. And it can be an experience. Like you can go to a concert, you can have a listening party, you can move to it, you can sing it, you can write out the lyrics. There's so many easy exercises like gap fills or just karaoke. There's so many ways, no matter what kind of learner you are, that you can adapt music for yourself. And I never, if I'm teaching, I never say like, you have to know all the lyrics. Even if you just know the refrain of a song and then build up the keywords later, I feel that's a lot. That's a lot of information in a kind of nice little sonic package.
Yeah, I mean, my experience has been that too. When you learn even just to say the refrain, the chorus of a song, often when you meet people who speak the language, they're kind of surprised that as a learner you know that. But it also gives you a closeness as well.
Yeah, I agree. They're really surprised, they're really pleased often, and like because music taps into our emotions. I had a really interesting talk with researcher at Goldsmiths. Goldsmiths have a music, mind, and brain degree.
Wow.
And a kind of research lab. And one of the professors, she was saying, there's really not a lot of hard research around emotions. There's not one definition for emotions, but music we know taps into that. And so it does create this kind of instant bond with people. Like, I had a taxi driver the other day who was half Turkish, and I mentioned, I speak a little Turkish. I love this singer, that singer. And he was like, wow, how do you know that? I used to make mixtapes from my childhood sweetheart with Sezen Aksu on it. And it was just such a nice moment. It kind of really enriches your day-to-day exchanges.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, some of my fondest memories of classes where the teacher actually integrated music just stick with me because of the way the language was. Because also, like you said, it's often the way people speak, or it's turns of phrase or vocabulary that people will often use, or things that mean something.
And the repetition built in. I mean, I had an email from a student last week, and he was saying that he tried some other program that just had the worst selection of music for he called it Barney rock or something. But even then, it stuck with him. So even if it's not necessarily nice music, I had a Dutch teacher who brought really like my least favorite kind of music on the planet to class. Really things I would never play at home in a million years. Really, really awful music. But I can tell you the lyrics of this really bad Belgian pop song, even, 20 years later. Yeah. So it just taps into our memory. It taps into our emotions. And yeah, I think it helps us drop all the stressful stuff about traditional language learning, because you learn so much without being so explicit about it. You can break down a song after, like, this is this grammar point, or this is this noun, or this is this verb. But we have such an intuitive connection to music. I think we absorb so much more than your average class.
Yeah, I do remember those penny drop moments where you've learnt a song, you've learnt the thing off by heart, and then you get to that kind of grammatical point, or someone is explaining it to you, and you have that, oh, it's like in that song.
Yeah, yeah. I had a really funny conversation with a friend recently. He's from Chad and he grew up in France, and he listened to a lot of English hip hop, and so he would know like the melody of a song. And he told me about one of his penny drop moments, which was hilarious because he knew this song that went, just had a show, had a show. And then he was doing security for a club in London. And it was someone's birthday. And then he'd learned a bit of the language, and then it clicked. Like the song was saying, it's your birthday, gonna party like it's your birthday. And he was just like mind blown that he'd been listening to this song for years. And that was how you said happy birthday in English.
Oh, wow.
So there's so many funny, just cultural references. My partner's from Burundi, and he was telling me about how like he and his mates would just completely invent Bob Marley lyrics and felt that they spoke English. and then later they were like, oh wow, like now we actually understand it. But they connected so much to the music that the music kind of pulled them towards the language, you know?
Yeah, those misheard lyrics are always quite fun as well.
Yeah, hilarious.
I remember at university, a German student said to me, you know that song? I always thought it was saying Parmesan, Parmesan. And it was, how bizarre, how bizarre.
How bizarre. Yeah, that's a great one. Or so many people mistake the Jimi Hendrix one. Excuse me while I kiss this guy. When he's talking about kiss the sky.
Yeah, kiss the sky. It's cute though. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's cute. And, you know, everyone has a mortifying language learning story of just pure embarrassment and wanting to dig a hole and go sit in it. But music kind of, eases the sting a little bit.
But I think it makes it actually, those embarrassing moments and those misheard lyrics, they're actually really cool conversation pieces because they really engage and they make you laugh and they bring out positive emotions, right? So getting it wrong is actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's it. And I think like this vulnerability of language learning, because you have to be vulnerable to learn a language, to dare to make mistakes, to try and get better, you know, and I think that's beautiful. And yeah, the conversation pieces are great. And I feel like there's so much in school that suggests that language learning is a linear thing, like point A, point B, now I'm fluent, yay. But I don't feel it's like that at all. Like I've been learning French since I was 6. But when I went to Quebec, I was lost. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand anything. So, you know, it's really a thing of like how exposed you are to different accents, how much you're practicing. I think confidence, I feel like, you know, if you're feeling shy at all, or if you just meet brand new people, sometimes I feel like, even though I'm fluent in the language, if I'm just meeting brand new people who I don't know, I immediately start like, you know, forgetting words that I know, or language learning is an emotional thing.
Yeah.
And it's a vulnerable thing. And I think music speaks to both of those points.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, do you think this is something that could be a benefit for anyone and everyone who's learning a language?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, it's not like it has to be exclusively that. You know, I love also watching films, and I love writing, and I love kind of signing up to, you know, lots of different classes. You know, at the moment I'm on Italki with Zulu. I'm doing an Amharic course with the Africa Institute in Sharjah. I just like meeting other teachers, and you always learn something from a class, even though it's not your favorite method. And, you know, I've built my languages through music, like masterclass over like 10 years. And there are people who love it and it's really helpful for them. And there are people who are like, you know, I need more structure, or it's just different for everyone. But I think it definitely can help, because I remember one guy in particular, when I had first started my Portuguese through music workshops in London. And usually people come to a workshop like mine because they like music. But this guy really surprised me. He was like, actually, no, like I don't even listen to music. I don't know anything about music, but I've just tried everything else and nothing has worked. So here I am. And it was really cool with him because sometimes he would remember the melody first. Even as someone who doesn't necessarily like music, we'd see a word and he'd be like, oh, he would remember the melody of the song where he first learned that word, and then the definition would come to mind. So I've seen it work with people who call themselves like anti-musicians. So I feel it can really help everybody. And for some reason, it's still not as popular as I think it should be. I'm planning to collaborate with my Amharic teacher to create a kind of playlist for our class. And he was like, this is really new. This is really original. And I'm just like, but music has been there forever. Like, why aren't we using it as a standard in every school? I feel like everyone could be trilingual by the time they graduate if teachers were more open to using alternative methods as well.
Yeah, I mean, so what you're saying really is we could just use it from day one, I guess. Right away. We don't need to wait.
That's it. I feel, Benny is a big supporter of, jumping in from day one. And I feel the same with music because I've heard a few times people say, oh, I'm not good enough at the language yet to dive into the music. It's like, how good enough do you have to be to listen to a song? Because even if you listen to the song while you're washing the dishes or whatever, and then afterwards you pick out 10 key words, those are 10 key words, and that's an artist. And then thanks to all the tech we have with, Spotify or Instagram, or I love on Instagram how if you share a post and you look up a topic, it gives you a ton of suggestions. So you could look up that topic in another language, and then you get 10 songs about beaches or islands or travel or whatever you're talking about, So there's so many ways with the tech we have to just work it seamlessly into our day, because if we listen to one artist or one language, the algorithm is then going to suggest more of those artists or more of those languages, or Instagram pages to follow that talk about that language. So I think we're way more supported with it.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't even really need to worry about the written form. The study of that can even wait, I guess. It could be secondary.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the learner or their goals. But I feel like it makes even written forms less scary. Like, as you know, with Thai, Thai alphabet is not a walk in the park, right? So as my Thai teacher, Krupimi, she calls it silapat abstract art. She's like, you just need to treat it as abstract art.
Yeah.
But if you find a karaoke video on YouTube, and so you're listening to this song and seeing it highlight the letters as it goes along, even that is a less painful way for me to learn the written form. Or with, Amharic or Tigrinya, like, this is 240 something letters. But if I'm looking at a karaoke thing, that's more fun than flashcards.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Thai, because obviously that's one thing that we have in common in our family histories. We both have this Thai influence, these Thai families, this Thai culture that was kind of mixed into our own backgrounds from a young age. And well, I love that. I love that when we first met and we could kind of, meet on that term of we have this thing that when anyone looks at us from outside, they don't see it.
Yes.
But we both have this influence. And people talk about, obviously Thai is a tonal language, and Chinese is another tonal language that a lot of people learn, and there's lots of music in Chinese that people can sing in and listen to, but the tones are missing very often. And I know there's a new kind of wave of introducing tones into a certain type of Chinese music that's getting more popular nowadays. But how do you think that impacts the learning process if you're learning, say, a tonal language through song, but the tones aren't really there in the same way?
I think the tones can be definitely overwhelming if you're new to language learning, especially. And stuff like, I always forget what it is in Thai, but ba, 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 like, ba, that can be crazy, that can be forest, or that can be auntie. So I joked with my Thai teacher that my DJ name in Bangkok will be Crazy Forest Auntie, because I just thought it was so funny. Or in Tagalog, I used to live in Manila, and in Tagalog, if you say ba 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 ba, it's, are you going down? And I used to live on the 32nd floor, which was like almost the top of the building. So I always got the chance to go, ba 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 ba. So I just think like, yeah, tones need to be approached with humor. And then the response by the bewildered Filipino neighbor would be like, ba ba ba. Like, of course I'm going down. This is the 32nd floor. But I'm running a Lingala through music workshop at the moment with my friend Michael Missy. He runs a Lingala school, Litea ya Lingala. And so we collaborate on these workshops. And Lingala is also tonal. So what he will do is, you know, we'll go through the song, we'll learn the meaning. So you're not just slapped in the face with all the accents and the tones. You're already in there about the song, the meaning, the melody. It sounds great. It's fun. You're relaxed, you know, and then when you're relaxed, you can dive into the harder stuff, I feel.
Yeah.
And so then afterwards, after we go through the lyrics a bit, then he'll read it out and he'll ask us like, where's the accent? Where's the stress? Where's the tone? So in Lingala, moto are totally different words. Or ngai is me, or ngai is bitter. So there's like lots of ways you can make a mistake. Yeah. But what he does is, you know, we do the song as we normally would in a workshop, and then afterwards he works in the accents, you know, makes it interactive, asks us where we would put the accents, he reads it out, we repeat it to him. So yeah, sometimes in this case, he won't put the accents in at first. When we're listening to the song, he just focuses on giving us the meaning. And then he layers in the accent detail and the tones afterwards. Because I think if you hit people with the tones up front, that might intimidate them a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I guess it's kind of getting used to the sounds of the language and then worrying about sort of adding the layers on afterwards.
Yeah, I think so. I think we can be really hard on ourselves sometimes with language learning. Or people feel like, you know, if they make one mistake, it's the end of the world. But, you know, no one speaks any language perfectly. And people, even within a city, there's different accents and different slang and I feel people need to be less hard on themselves. And the more music widely you listen, the more you see how many words that different languages have in common. And I think especially when you're new to language learning, that can be such a cool portal. It's like, oh, I'm trying to learn Arabic, but when I listen to this Swahili song, I recognize words from Arabic, or I recognize words from French in this Arabic song, or you start to just slowly make this connect the dots that is nice because you see how universal music is, how much languages influence each other. I used to love in the odd textbook when I was teaching English, those chapters on all the loan words we have in English from different languages. You know, that's beautiful. Like, how did we get words from this or that? Or I love that. That makes the world a lot smaller, I feel.
If you're listening generally to a language, what kind of things do you think you need to do to get the most benefit? And how do you act in an intentional manner? How do you do that in a kind of a deliberate way to get the most out of the listening, to learn the language?
I kind of have two modes. I think I'm personally quite a chaotic learner. Like, I try and learn many things at the same time. Or I'll buy like 10 notebooks and then that project might not happen. Or like, so I feel I can be a bit of a chaotic learner. So I have kind of playlists that I make just based off of what I enjoy listening to or artists I like. And then if I'm trying to build up vocabulary for a specific reason, or for example, for my new masterclass, I realized that a lot of learners need more structure than I can tolerate. So I made a more structured kind of 30-day guide. Okay. So I just made a list of like the biggest topics to kind of help people build their own playlist, because I can give all the million song resources and ebooks and playlists that I feel like, but it's only when you make language learning your own and totally independent that I feel you actually get somewhere. So I just took 30 main topics, family, friends, nature, travel, shopping, whatever. And I just put it in a list for 30 days to encourage people to start that independent journey. So they see the list and they're like, oh, okay, travel. So I need to find songs about travel in my target language. So that means I need to look up, 10 words to do with travel. So they do that themselves.
Yeah.
And then they make a playlist of like, okay, in Portuguese, I found Samba de Avião, or I found Corcovado, or I found, they can then list, they make it personal to them. So, and then they know, okay, in these songs, there's travel vocab, or in these songs, there's family vocab, or in these ones, so it's a little more organized according to topic.
Yeah.
So I do both. I kind of, I think I'm more like an emotional learner. So I'll go with songs I really like.
Yeah.
But since I know there are people who, would prefer that kind of more structured one, I've made this 30-day topic suggestion so that people can take more ownership of their own playlist building.
Yeah, I love what you said there about making it personal, because I'm a great believer in that too. I think language needs to make sense. So if you're taking the time to look up vocabulary or look up things, it needs to be things that mean something to you personally and things that you're likely to want to say and to say over and over again, I guess, so that you get the repetition in, right?
That's it. And I think that, a lot of time with learning, traditional school makes us too kind of lazy and dependent, I feel. We wait for the teacher to give us this. We wait for the next test. We wait for the next chapter. Like, life's not like that. So, I really believe in, like, I used to work for Theatre of the Oppressed, and I'm super influenced by Pedagogy of the Oppressed and bell hooks and making learning like a really independent thing. It distresses me that I can't remember this quote exactly or who said it, but I remember seeing a quote once saying that the best teachers make themselves the most useless as quickly as possible. So yeah, the best teachers just, one, inspire you, two, give you all the resources you need to do it yourself and are there to support, but it's a totally individual journey within a community, which is great, and exchange-wise, and learning-wise. But those words are coming out of your mouth and your heart and your brain. So you need to do that journey. So the best teachers, really make themselves unnecessary as soon as they can.
Yeah, there's a real power in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My best teachers, every time I ask people about their favorite teachers of life, people generally have like 3-4 maximum in their lifetime who really marked them.
Yeah.
And those teachers are more often than not people that made you feel empowered, or people that made you feel that you were a generative, creative being that didn't need to sit there and be spoon-fed whatever lesson or whatever project, but that they could give you a prompt and you'd run with it.
Love, travel, study, work, friendship, whatever your reason for wanting to learn a new language, Teach Yourself provides the tools you need. Choose from over 70 languages and teach yourself today. Go to teachyourself.com, trusted by language learners for over 85 years. Lately I've been learning Cornish, for the past 4 years actually. And
wow.
I'm getting ready for my final exams, which are going to be in the next couple of months. And one of the parts of the exams is like the typical listening exam. And without exception, in the groups that I go to online for Cornish, the people there who are taking the exam are always sort of more nervous about the listening. And they describe it as kind of just a wall of language that feels almost impenetrable. How do we make sense of something we're listening to and it just almost sounds like I just, almost like a wall of language. You just feel hit by it. If you're looking at reading or writing or exercises or things, is there a way to kind of combine them to make sense of it? Is there another thing that you do to make sense of it in the beginning? How do you go about the wall and tackling the wall, scaling this wall of language?
Scaling this wall, I love making lists. I'm a big list maker.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big list nerd. So I like making my keyword lists because I feel like if you get the keywords, then chances are you'll be able to make sense of what's happening, which is why also I kind of like this this new kind of structured approach I'm trying with my playlist. So like I'm inviting people to add, according to topic. So nature, people can add a song, or friends, people can add their songs, because then that focusing on the keywords, and I've seen some articles where it's like all songs use like the same 200 to 500 words, can really help. Also, getting exposure to as many accents as possible, like either via italki or just the artists or the platforms I'll follow on socials. Just really try and get as many accents in there as possible. Like I was in Cape Verde last week and I learned Portuguese in Brazil. So my accent is way more Brazilian, and my comfort zone is way more with Brazilian Portuguese. So yeah, it's just getting that exposure, asking people, because people say, "Oh, are you Brazilian?" No, I learned Portuguese there. And then I would just ask them, what does this mean? Or what does that mean? Or, because I've listened to so much Cape Verdean music as well. Like, what does this song mean? I don't know this in Brazilian Portuguese, or what does this word mean? So exposures to different accents, organizing your playlist into keywords for whichever topic you have to use. Also, I think films are great because films speak at, with language textbooks. A lot of the voices are like this, but with films, you get full speed. And so I think films are great when you're watching the film with the target language as subtitles, because then it's working on your reading, it's working on your listening, but you're also wrapped up in this story, so it's not boring. And just repetition, not even if you're not kind of listening super intently, just having it playing, go on a walk, listen to a podcast. I really feel like people get so worked up if they don't understand everything right away. Mm-hmm. But you can just be listening passively, as it were. And then 2-3 months later, it's like, whoa, like it just clicks. In my experience, when I first moved to Brazil, I watched all the kind of novellas and films, and I didn't understand anything for like 2 months. And then all of a sudden it clicked in a big way. And I never took traditional classes like I did with French. Yeah, and never giving up.
I like that message of breathe and take your time and let it wash over you. Kind of let nature take its course. The idea of obviously the word list and picking out words and doing things like that, and then building that up to get a gist of what's going on before you can really fill in all the gaps. Maybe you might not fill in all the gaps ever, but it's letting it wash over you, right?
And making it fun, which I think, music really helps with for me. I remember during lockdown when everyone had way more time on their hands, and I made just like playlist of travel, because I'm so used to traveling. I travel every month at least once for different teaching work or so I've traveled enormously. And so lockdown for me was mad because for a year you couldn't go anywhere. And so I missed traveling so much. So I literally made an A to Z playlist. So I looked up all the countries that start with A, and I just went into their kind of top 10 artists, random places I'd never been to, Azerbaijan, bring it, and then you just find all these different sounds. And I think once your ear just starts to get used to the sounds, you can twig what people are talking about a lot faster. But it's like it takes a while for your ear just to build that kind of knowledge bank, or it's like with pronunciation. I'm learning Kirundi now, and it's so hard because there are sounds in it that I've never used before.
Yeah.
And it's just, having that exposure to, it's like a little workout for your ears. Like you just by listening passively, you're already encouraging your ears to work with you,
Yeah, I think you're right. The sounds of the language, letting it wash over you is really a key thing. And you mentioned, these idea of watching novellas or films. What do you think are the advantages or disadvantages of slowing down audio? Because like on YouTube and stuff, you've got that idea of you can make it a half speed or 0.75. What do you think of that as a technique?
I mean, I was so excited when I found that little button on YouTube because when you're trying to sing along to a language, it's so useful to slow it down. So like, when you're just trying to learn song by song, and I really encourage people to sing along no matter how much they dislike their voice, because, once you embody it, once you're producing it in song, that gives I think it really improves pronunciation, confidence, memory, because it's a physical activity as well. So I think if you're actively trying to memorize a line or sing along with something, learn the lyrics, sing along with something, that is a godsend, that slow down button, for sure. But otherwise, like, I much prefer to, like, if I'm listening to something with a teacher and I have to answer specific questions, it can be very useful. But in general, I think the material made for native speakers is way more interesting than the material made for language learners. So, you just dive into the thick of things. I think instead of having this overly cautious, like, oh, I'm not good enough yet to watch a film in another language, but just throwing yourself in and like even getting 10 new words, 20 new words, I think that's great. And by watching something, you have something to talk about. Like if you meet someone, like I met Algerian guy the other day, and I was like, oh, one of my favorite films is this Algerian film, Delis Paloma. He's like, what? How do you know that? How do you know this Algerian film? So it's just a nice way to connect with people. And if you live somewhere like London, you're constantly meeting people from other countries.
Yeah, of course.
So that's really nice to be able to show interests, like you don't have to have a friend from that country to show some interest in that country's culture or language or art, or I think we're spoiled in big cities, but we're spoiled with the internet. No matter where we are in the world, we can, with a few little taps of our fingers, we can connect with other places. I don't know if you know it, there's this website called Radio Garden.
Yes, I've heard of them.
Isn't it beautiful? Yeah. And then you can just hover over the whole globe and then go listen to a radio in St. Lucia or Sri Lanka or wherever. So during lockdown, I felt like I almost traveled as much as usual because, we're so lucky to have all these online resources.
Well, I guess also you can ask the internet now as well to listen on your device to what the song is, so that it can identify and give you the name and things like that if you like something.
Have you tried any of these funny new tech things that you pop into your ear and it claims to translate 20 languages? Just like some Google AirPod or Google Translate Pod. Have you tried any of them? I haven't tried them yet.
I've not tried the translation ones, no. But what I have done is I've used ChatGPT and used it in different languages. So I've spoken to ChatGPT in different languages, and it's been quite an interesting thing to do. Sort of asking questions about certain things like, famous figures or historical moments, or what it thinks about certain things going on in the world. I mean, the one I use isn't connected to the internet right now. It's sort of the poor man's version. But it is very useful for that kind of thing. For sort of, sometimes it gets things wrong, especially when we're talking about languages that are not well represented online. So for certain languages, it will get things wrong, and it won't quite know how to describe certain things. But for the more commonly accessible languages online, it's fairly good.
Yeah, I find it very helpful for making lists of keywords. So sometimes I'll take, especially if you can find the lyrics of the song, sometimes I'll copy paste the lyrics in and ask ChatGPT to give me 30 keywords from the song with their English translation.
Ah, lovely.
And that's instant. And I mean, I always want to check it with the native speaker because ChatGPT can be wild sometimes, but often it works.
Do you have any types of music that you recommend people choose, or I mean, how do you say to people that they should choose the music?
When they're making their own playlists, it's really whatever speaks to them the most. I encourage people to make a really eclectic playlist. So have a nice balance of like groups, solo artists, men, women, young, old, different styles of music, just so you get that breadth. Really kind of mix it up so you're getting exposure to, hopefully different accents or different slang. I mean, it's great just to have party tunes because they're often super catchy and they'll stick and they'll put you in a good mood. But I think it's really great to just do a little research into like what songs were banned, what songs were like, what songs pissed off the government of that country? What songs were, so for example, it makes me think of, there's a great song in Turkish called Yaz Yaz Gazeteci Yaz. And it's basically like, that means, write, journalist, write. And it talks about like, she's Selda Bajan, she's singing, don't write about this kind of happy news, whatever, or write about this. So it's talking about like real social issues. So for me, if I can make a playlist where I'm also learning about history, I think that's really important. And have, really slow, easy kind of lullaby-ish things to ease you in. You don't want to start with a 120 beat per minute rap song because you won't get much, so have this evolution of like really chill, slow songs, maybe with a lot of repetition, up to like the stretch goal. One day I'll be able to understand this song. But more than anything, you need to just enjoy it. I feel, it needs to be something that you can play at home, that you can play in your car, that you can play on tube, like just because that connection to it is going to make it so much easier for you to then do the harder work of like, okay, what are the keywords? What are they singing? Absolutely. If you enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. The last thing you want to do is have music on in the background that you hate.
That's it. This Dutch teacher really did my head in with her music selection. And then I was trying to be polite, so I couldn't be like, please stop with this auto-tuned pop nonsense.
I love it.
And then what I like doing is getting into the artist as well. So, I think it's very important to, listen to artists who are the originals and no longer with us. But if the artists have a social media platform and that you can follow them on, or interviews that you can listen to, or getting to know them as a person, I think that's, very interesting as well. One of my favorite Brazilian artists, Edgimota, he goes on these very long Instagram lives talking about everything. and it's just, sometimes I'll just tune in. If I'm working, I'll just tune into him in the background. Or he's a big foodie and big into his wine. So like he talks about lots of different topics as someone I got to know through their music, but I'm also learning so many other things because of, the different interests or the different causes of the different artists. So
I love these lead-ins. Music really is a lead-in, isn't it?
It is. If you set a big textbook in front of people, like often, textbooks have their value. Like I made a resource where it's like for 40 languages, there's 3 external playlists. and then 3 links to different textbooks. So textbooks have their value, but if you start with that, you will put 90% of people off. If you just go, here's your textbook, as opposed to here's your playlist, people will run for the hills. I would run for the hills because I'm not that kind of student, but yeah.
You've been at this, I think, the teaching for like 20 years or something like that. And
yes,
and as a musician as well. And then you started the languages through music, what was it, about 10 years ago?
That's right. Yeah. 10th anniversary in January.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Well, congratulations on all of that.
Thank you.
I mean, is there a point that you sort of had a light bulb moment where you were like, these two things go together, these worlds combine?
Yeah. I mean, I think I had my first professional singing opportunity when I was about 18. And I'd taken French for 12 years at school and I could barely hold a conversation. And then I got an opportunity to work for this group, Zap Mama, this Belgian Congolese group. And I felt like in a couple months of like learning songs and working with Francophone artists, I all of a sudden felt like way more fluent. And people were commenting like, oh, your French has really improved. And this is when I had just graduated from school. So I was like, oh, maybe that's it. But I still kind of doubted it because I was like, oh, maybe my French was kind of sitting there in the back of my brain. And then music just lured it out.
Yeah.
But then I moved to Brazil when I was 20 and I'd never taken Portuguese classes there. Mm-hmm. But I just hit the music straight away. And I had this lovely flatmate, Fabio, who would kind of go through the lyrics with me. And I just threw myself into, I didn't do the traditional route like I did with French. And within a couple months, I was interning at a theater company. You need to be able to talk in a theater company. So I was really amazed with how fast I learned Portuguese thanks to music. But then I was like, oh yeah, but maybe since Portuguese is close to French, that's why it worked. So I was still kind of doubting it. And then I think it was when I got some backing vocal work for a Turkish artist, Hadise. Like I love Istanbul. I'd been for friends and I took a couple classes, but it was really learning Hadise's 20-song playlist, set list, that got me chatting in Turkish, which is a language I had no connection to whatsoever before I got this gig. So I was like, okay, maybe there's something to this thing. So it was really like a gradual process over years because I got my TEFL and CELTA certificate and I was teaching English all along, like in parallel to my music work. But, I taught for maybe a dozen schools in Belgium, Brazil, and a lot of schools have their own agenda and curriculum, right? So they really want their teachers to stick to a specific course or textbook so most of the time there wasn't really that much space to experiment with music in the schools. I think I even turned down a job at Berlitz because how strict they were terrified me. They were really like, you cannot deviate. No. You must teach this. So I didn't really feel I had the space to experiment until I moved to London in 2012. And then I was like, oh, London is quite open and experimental and artistic and creative. And there's workshops for all kinds of stuff. And I feel London is, or was at least, very open-minded 12 years ago. Yeah. It's getting less so maybe. But, so multicultural, so multilingual. So that's when I was like, maybe I'll just try my own workshop. I'd been teaching for 10 years at the time. And that's when I was like, people were coming to my workshops in the evening and I was, we'd watch the music video and I just kind of started teaching people how I taught myself these languages and kind of always doubting in my head. Cause, I feel at school we get really like, if you're having too much fun, you're not learning. Yeah. Or if students are laughing too much, they're not learning. We have this really foolish thing of like, oh, you need to suffer to learn or you need to suffer to achieve, which is so nonsense, which is what I had to kind of de-educate myself with, which I did with like reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed, reading Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks, and also having great teachers along the way. And so, yeah, it was really 2014 where I think I started with Portuguese because that's really what was my favorite language to learn. And then I officially made it Languages to Music in 2014. Yeah, so now I've had thousands of students online or in person, or I just launched this new masterclass. So I had 40 new students this month. And it's really, yeah, I mean, it's a process. But now that I have 20 years of teaching, I'm getting slightly more confident that like, maybe this does make sense. Like it's worked for me. It's worked for a lot of other people. Some people it won't work for, but yeah, I think it's so valuable and it's so enjoyable. And I think it's just kind of changing our mindset around languages and teaching.
I mean, what's it meant to you personally on your own journey? What's language learning meant to you? What have you gained from it?
That's a good question. I think, I mean, I met a friend for coffee yesterday and she gave me a really nice reflection in terms of my Languages to Music work in particular. She was just like, you should be really proud of yourself because it's so you. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you love languages, you love music, you love people, you love travel, you love culture. And with Languages to Music, you've managed to smush all your favorite things like into a brand, as it were, or a product or an experience. So I was like, oh, thanks. I was like, yeah, you're right. These are all the things I really love. So for me, yeah, it's a kind of holistic way of learning and being, and I hope like very inclusive, because for me it turned something I really didn't enjoy for the first 18 years of my life to something I know I want to be doing forever.
Yeah.
And also, like, you have all these, I grew up in so many places and I'm from several places. So I had a lot of and have a lot of hang-ups about like, oh, I don't speak Thai well enough and I'm born there. Like, what's wrong with me? Or I don't speak Tigrinya well enough and my dad was like a major poet of Eritrea. Like, what's wrong with me? Or I don't speak, French perfectly. So I think I was able to channel these kind of negative feelings into something positive for myself, but also something positive for other people, because I've experienced the not so great parts of language learning, identity stuff, to channeling it into something really a lot more uplifting. It's taught me a lot, and it's a lifelong project. Like, I'll never speak all the languages I want to speak perfectly or even maybe a little. But it's just that process of like unlearning the unhelpful things, like we're kind of taught or suggested like, oh, you can't speak more than X many languages, which you have fully removed that illusion for people. Or, people grow up thinking like, oh, I'll never be able to speak all those languages, or I don't have the time, or I don't have the resources, or I don't, why would I learn a language if I don't know people from that place? Or so, yeah, I think I'm trying to show people how life-affirming language learning can be, especially through something like music.
Yeah, I think you do a wonderful job, and the positivity and your learning and the way you've taken these life lessons and turned them into something positive as well really shines through. And just to kind of finish off, I'd love to just get some final thoughts from you on somebody's listening to this now out there. If you were to give them some hints on techniques, tricks, things that they could do, exercises, or just a piece of advice, what would you say to that person listening out there now who wants to take this and move forward and do something from it?
have the music playing every day. Just start listening to the music. That's all you need to do. And then when you want to take it a step further, just experiment to see what works for you, whether it's having a steady partner or making flashcards, post-it notes. So you just have to start experimenting to see what works for you so you can design your own kind of language through music journey.
And I guess there are if you don't know where to start to find music, you can always ask people online. You could always take to the social media channels and just say, looking for recommendations, and start with even recommendations from other people, right? And just say,
look for recommendations. If people go to Languages Through Music on Spotify, I have dozens of playlists in all kinds of random languages. It's all there. It's really all there. I put together a free resource which covers like 40 languages with different playlists, and just really it's there. And I think if people don't set too stressful goals, just start with like 10 words from a song. I'm a firm believer in, if we're enjoying it, we're going to stick to it, and we're going to learn way more than if we're not. And I have ordered tons of books. I've done tons of classes. I've tried a million methods, and it always comes back to that. Like, unless I'm entertained or relaxed or having fun, I'm going to zone out. I will not be there. I will not be present. So music helps keep me present and persistent.
Perfect. What a wonderful way to end this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, Desta.
Thank you so much.
It was a wonderful...
Thank you, Richard.
Wonderful for me to get to talk to you and to hear your journey, your experience, your advice. And I hope that people out there will go and find you on Spotify, go and find your resources, come and look for you and ask you questions and interact with you, because you are extremely
Thank you so
easy
much.
to talk to and very approachable. And yeah, you're a wonderful example to follow. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. So nice to be here. So nice to talk to you. And I hope we can connect and practice our Thai together sometime. I want to hear your Thai playlist.
I may have to read yours first.
Welcome to. Khop kun mak kap. Thank you.
A massive thank you to Desta Haile for joining me on the Language Podcast. So that was listening. Next, it's reading. Ollie Richards from Story Learning is our man. Make sure you subscribe so you're the first to hear when that conversation goes live. Let me know what you've learned from Desta today. Will you be creating a new playlist of foreign music, or perhaps downloading Desta's? Get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.